How to fund the growth of your business. If you're going to raise money to fund your business, there are three fundamental ways to fund the growth of a business and one other way. The three fundamental ways are internally generated, which is also called organic funding, debt, and equity. So internally generated funding, debt, and equity funding. These are the three fundamental funding methods for growth of your company. The fourth method, which I mentioned, is not fundamental but is also pretty important for startup companies, is hybrid funding, which usually takes the form of convertible debt or safe note or equivalent convertible instrument. This is funding that starts off non-equity funding and later under pre-agreed conditions can or does convert into equity. I'll cover convertible funding instruments in another video. So in this lesson, we're going to talk only about the three fundamental methods, which are internally generated debt and equity. So internally generated funding, I think everybody is familiar with. This is the traditional method of funding the growth of a business. The entrepreneur starts the business with some of their own money. They use that initial funding to generate revenue. They subtract out the cost of the business from the revenue, which creates some potential profit. Those potential profits are reinvested in growing the business. The business then generates more revenue, which generates more potential profit, which is reinvested in continuing to grow the business. This is by far the most common funding method of growing a business. Second method is debt, and everybody I think is also familiar with debt. You borrow money, usually from a bank, at some interest rate for a pre-agreed period of time. You pay back the money with interest. While you're using that money, you invest it in growing the business, and the business generates revenue. Some of that revenue is used to pay off the debt and the other debt capital, plus any potential profits are reinvested in growing the business. Third funding method that can be used to grow your business is equity funding. Equity funding is selling ownership stake in your business to investors who then become shareholders in the business. The cash that you get from the shareholders is then invested in growing the business. The investor shareholders then have claim on the sum of the value of the business based on how much money they invested and what was the value of the business when they invested. Their equity can be worth more than what they paid for it in the future if the business grows successfully. So three fundamental forms of funding: internally generated or organic, debt funding, and equity funding. Now, next thing we want to consider: what are the pluses and minuses of each of those forms of funding, and what is the preferred form of funding out of those three for startup companies?